DreAllDay.com.
Now tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves all of us, including yourself, especially yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. We put all this together into one bundle, one package, one mindset, one philosophy, one book, one show, this masterclass that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. You are in the right place at the right time, and in case you were wondering, yes, you are the right person, because today's topic is how to think bigger, how to expand the size of your thinking, expand the capacity of your thinking, how to just allow yourself to choose to think at a higher level. How can you do this? That's what we're going to talk about here today. I came upon this topic because I was in Las Vegas, Nevada in the summer of 2020. Yes, I went to Vegas in the summer of 2020. There was a lot of people there, believe it or not. And I was looking out the window at one point and I saw that the Wynn Hotel has a parking garage, not a parking lot, but a parking garage just for the staff. That's what it said on the side of the building. It said Wynn Hotel Staff Garage. And this was not a small, this wasn't a little tiny thing. This is a wide, like the size of the whole street, and it was several stories tall just for the people who worked there. And what I was thinking about was I wasn't really thinking about the people who work there. I was thinking about the people who run that place, the people who own the Wynn Hotels. I'm guessing that would be Steve Wynn. That's the guy he named the hotel after himself. And if you haven't been to Vegas, you know that the Wynn, or if you have been to Vegas, you know that the Wynn is actually two towers. One is called the Wynn, the other is called the Encore. They're right next to each other. They are like gold-plated buildings. They're damn near like the last luxury hotel at the far, I believe that's the north end of the strip. Yeah, I think that's the north end of the strip. And if you've never been inside, even if you've been to Vegas or you've never been inside the Wynn Hotel, I would suggest that you go inside the Wynn Hotel. The place is amazing. It smells good. It looks good. There's a mall attached to it. With all luxury shops. You name any kind of luxury goods that get sold, like clothing, anything that will be in a mall is inside of this little mall attached. It's not a little mall attached to the Wynn Hotel. The sports book is amazing. The casino floor is amazing. The restaurants are amazing. The suites and the actual rooms where you stay, those are amazing. The Wynn Hotel is a beautiful place, and it only made sense that they need a whole lot of great staff to keep that place running the way that it runs. And they had a whole garage just for the people who work there. Now again, just that little thing is what made me think of it, because I can understand having a garage for the customers who come stay there, or having a garage for, I don't know, just a garage period. And you can just rent out the space and charge people and write them tickets if they don't pay, tow their cars and things like that. But it's a garage just for the people who work there. That's big thinking to me. That's what triggered this thought. Now, there are many books out there on thinking bigger. There are chapters and books on thinking bigger. I've talked about it in some of my books. In my book, The Super You, I talked about it in my book, Work on Your Game, which you can get at workonyourgamebook.com. There's also The Magic of Thinking Big by David J. Schwartz. If you never read that book, that's a classic book when it comes to just mindset and increasing your capacity for belief, which is something that we've done an entire masterclass on capacity for belief. Let me see what that is. Masterclass number 198 from back in 2016. Again, 198. The question is, what is your capacity for belief? Also, one of my favorite authors, Paul Arden, he wrote a book called It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be. He talks about thinking big as well. So today what we're going to talk about, we're going to give you a mental framework that you can start using to start thinking bigger in your life, about yourself and about where you're going. Point number one, topic once again, is how to think bigger. First thing you must do, and I borrowed this one straight from Paul Arden, is develop a complete disregard for where your abilities end. He talks about this in the book, again, which is titled, It Is Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be. That book is not available in audio. It's the type of book that you actually want to look at. You want to look at that book, and I would suggest you get the physical book. It's one of those books that you want to have the physical version because of all the art that is in it, and the format of the book is not a normal book with just a whole bunch of words on every page. My books are like that, but this book it's half visual and half written stuff. So you want to get the physical version, and Paul Arden's been dead for over a decade, so I doubt they're going to make an audio version of the book anyway. But anyway, entertain the idea. We're still on point one here. Entertain the idea that you can do a lot more than what you are doing. That's what you have to do. What you're doing is not the limit of how far you can go. Where you're at right now is not the maximum of what you can be. What you see someone in your environment, maybe you think they're doing well, it has nothing to do with how far you can go and how well you could possibly do. The starting point of achievement via Napoleon Hill's, his famous book, Think and Grow Rich, and via all of his, a lot of his lectures, for those of you who are interested in learning more from Napoleon Hill, a lot of his lectures are available on any streaming music service, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, SoundCloud, Amazon Music. They're all available on the free versions. You can just look up Napoleon Hill and all his lectures. I'm talking like 1 and 2 hour lectures from back in his day when he was on the lecturing circuit are available for free on any of those streaming platforms. One of the things Napoleon Hill says in Think and Grow Rich and in all of his material is the starting point of achievement is a burning desire for something. You have to have a desire to actually want to do something. That makes sense, right? I mean, you wouldn't desire something. Thinking about this, let's say you have a burning desire for something. You would not have a desire for a thing if there was no belief within you, at least a small amount of belief that it could be real for you. If you did not have at least the faith of a mustard seed, as it said, I believe that's said in the Bible, but don't get mad at me if I'm quoting it from the wrong place. If you got the faith of a mustard seed, the size of a mustard seed was a pretty small seed. That means it's possible that you could possibly do it. I know that's redundant, but it's my show. Maybe you might not even have a plan. The thing is real for you, but you might not even have a plan. You may have no idea how you're actually going to make this thing happen. But you know at least 1% in believing that you could actually get it. At least 1% of you believes that it's possible. That's what I'm saying. That's what I mean when I say the faith of a mustard seed. When Kobe Bryant, for example, was a youth playing basketball, I don't know if this was back when he was in Europe growing up or when he had come back over to the United States with his family after his father's basketball career had ended. He was telling people that he wanted to go to the NBA. And of course, people told him, like back for those of you who are not old enough to remember, back in the 80s and the 90s, when young athletes would say things like, I want to go to the NBA or I want to go to the NFL, the common response that would be given from adults, teachers, parents, respected neighbors, people in the community, things like that, they would always start reciting to you the statistics or the cliches about how few athletes actually make it in professional sports. They would say, well, 99% of athletes don't make it. It's a 1 in a million shot to make it to the NBA or the NFL or whatever. And Kobe Bryant, I remember reading Kobe saying this, that when someone told him that there was a 1 in a million shot to make it to the NBA, Kobe said, well, man, I'm trying to be that one. I'm trying to be that 1 in a million. You have to be, ladies and gentlemen, a little bit, quote unquote, crazy. That is compared to the masses. Relative to the masses, you got to be a little bit crazy in order to think bigger. You got to be able to look at what most people accept as the limits of their lives and see yourself as someone who does not have the same limits. You gotta look at how most people look at themselves and project their futures and say, okay, I could do this, this, and this, and it fits into this neat little box that maybe is just marginally better than where they are right now. And you gotta be able to look at yourself and see yourself as exponentially better than you are right now in such ways that you can't even draw a logical, reasonable, plausible line from where you are now to the future you see for yourself, but you still believe that it's possible, even though there's no logical way you can make sense of it right now. You gotta be crazy enough to believe that. As Steve Jobs said, and I'm paraphrasing, the people who change the future or change the world are those who are crazy enough to believe that they can. Kanye West, another person that people routinely call crazy. Kobe Bryant, who had to be crazy enough to believe, and this was obviously whoever told him that it was a 1 in a million thing, obviously before he became so obviously talented and so obviously good that it looked like he probably was going to make it to the NBA. He had to be crazy enough to believe that he could go for it, even though there were people around him, obviously whoever that was, who told him that it was only a 1 in a million chance that you can go. So you got to be crazy enough to allow yourself. Key word. Crazy enough to allow. That's the key word. Allow yourself to think bigger than how the average person thinks. And the reason we call it crazy is because, again, we're referring to relative to the people who are around you, the people who you're used to talking to every day, relative to how people in your environment normally think. The average person thinks the marginal growth, marginally get better. Let me be a little bit better than where I am right now. To look at their current spot in life, their current station in life, and say, okay, if I was to become a little bit better than this, or reasonably better, meaning looking at where I'm at and looking at what I'm capable of as of today, if I was to get to a higher level, where would that be? You got to be able to look at yourself and say, you know what, I'm not even going to base it on anything reasonable or logical. I see myself doing a million times better than I'm doing right now, even though I can't figure out how I would do it. I couldn't explain it to anybody, but I still believe it. That's what I'm talking about when I say crazy. Most people look at you and think you are crazy for thinking that, because most people are average, small-time thinkers. But remember what today's masterclass is about: how to think bigger. Point number 2. The topic, once again, is how to think bigger. Second thing you got to do is you got to stop thinking in terms of limits. This goes hand in hand with what we talked about in point number 1. Thinking in terms of limits is, I'll give you an example. Any of you ever saw the movie Blow with, who was that actor? I forget who the actor was. Blow was, I can't remember the guy's, Johnny Depp. There it is. Johnny Depp was the main character in this movie Blow. If you didn't see the movie, that's all right. I'll explain to you what it's about. It's about a guy named George Jung. It is loosely based on his life, or maybe not so loose, maybe tightly based on George Jung's life. If you don't know who George Jung was, he is credited as the person who introduced powder cocaine into the United States. So when cocaine took over the United States, George Jung was one of the main suppliers, bringing the cocaine in from Colombia and getting it sold wholesale all throughout the United States. And George Jung in the movie, there's a scene in the movie where this is before he was selling cocaine, he was selling marijuana first. He had first moved to California with his friend because he just wanted a different life. And he met some girls that he liked, and they were all flight attendants, and they all smoked weed. And then George was like, well, if everybody around here is smoking weed, everybody in California at that time, they're all smoking weed, shit, why don't we just become weed salespeople? We need jobs, we need some money. Why don't we just sell weed? Since everybody's smoking it, we can just sell it to our friends. And one of the girls that he knew somebody who was a weed supplier, so George started selling weed. And at one point, he became a much bigger marijuana dealer, and he flew down to, I don't remember where he was, some country in South or Central America, where there was this guy who had a whole farm where he was growing marijuana. And George wanted to buy some of that marijuana wholesale, and he says to the guy, all right, I'm gonna come down and I'm gonna buy your marijuana. And he's looking at this whole farm of marijuana plants, and George is like, all right, I'll take it. And the farmer is looking at him like he's crazy. And he's like, well, how much do you want? And George said, I want the whole thing. I want all of it. I'm gonna buy all the marijuana that you're growing right now. I will purchase the whole thing. And the farmer, who had never dealt with anyone who ever done that before, said, all right, this guy's crazy. He started talking to one of his friends, and the farmer said, "Están loco." All right, this guy's crazy because he thinks he's going to get all the marijuana. He's crazy. And George kind of understood. I mean, everybody knew George understood what the word loco meant, even though he didn't speak Spanish. And he said, all right, senor, how about I bring you, $50,000 in cash up front, just to alleviate your concerns. I'll alleviate all your concerns by giving you $50,000 up front, so you know that I'm not bullshitting, and you know that I have the money for this, and you know that I really mean it when I say I want to buy your whole farm of marijuana plants. And the farmer said, well, sir, if you bring me $50,000 in cash, I don't have any concerns. So anyway, the whole point is this. George Jung was thinking big, and he went on to think even bigger after he got introduced to someone who sold cocaine rather than selling marijuana, which was a more profitable drug. And that's how George became George. He became Boston George, and he became the guy who, again, according to the story, introduced powdered cocaine into the United States. You can go watch that movie. It came out like probably 20 years ago if you haven't seen it yet. But anyway, Mark Zuckerberg, another person who was not thinking in terms of limits. There was a time when Facebook, for those of you who saw the movie The Social Network, and those of you who are old enough and have been on the internet connected for long enough to remember, there was a time when Facebook was limited to college students. First of all, it was limited to the school that Mark Zuckerberg was at. I don't even remember what school he went to, but whatever, I think it was Harvard he was at. It was only for people in Harvard. Then he opened it up to anyone with a college.edu email address. Now, I remember this happened like right after I had graduated from college. So I no longer had my pennstate.edu email address, so I could not sign up for Facebook. And that went on for about a year. And then they opened it up to where anyone, you didn't have to be a college student, you didn't have to have a college email address to sign up for Facebook. Because I had friends telling me, like, yo, you should sign up for Facebook. And I'm like, yo, I ain't got the email address anymore. I can't sign up. But Mark Zuckerberg had the bright idea, let's make it available to anyone. Let's not limit ourselves just to college students and college campuses. Facebook could be for pretty much everybody. And I think we can agree that Mr. Zuckerberg had a good idea by opening Facebook up to as many people as possible. Thomas Edison, for example. I give you an example of someone not thinking in terms of limits who ended up actually being incorrect. But listen to the story. Thomas Edison, once the light bulb started to become ubiquitous, or he could see that it was going to become ubiquitous, and he is credited as a person who created the light bulb or discovered or invented, whatever words you want to use. At one point, Thomas Edison told the public that there will come a day that people will no longer need to sleep or rest or take naps because the whole world will be illuminated by the light bulb. And this will allow human beings to stay awake 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because we'll always have light. His assumption, or the theory that he was not saying indirectly here. Now, I don't know if Thomas Edison actually believed this, or maybe he was just being a salesperson. Maybe he was just talking up his product and his invention. Who knows? I don't know Thomas Edison. I can't tell you. But he was basically assuming indirectly that because we didn't have light bulbs before where we could control the light in a space whenever we wanted to, we had to go to sleep at night because there were no lights. So we couldn't control the light. So that's why people go to sleep. So he was saying, since we have a light bulb now, nobody will have to go to sleep because we'll have light all the time. Now that didn't happen. I think everyone would know that didn't happen. We still go to sleep because there are certain biological needs that we need as people that have nothing to do with the availability of electricity and light bulbs. However, see the idea that Thomas Edison was putting out there, that because this light bulb exists, we can stay up 24 hours a day and people will be so productive and so much more will be getting done, and all kinds of inventions will be made, and the world will just move forward 10 times faster simply because people will not need to spend that 8 hours a day asleep. Now, there are many people who are listening to me right now that said, Dre, I wish that had come true, because if I could stay awake 24 hours a day and be wide awake just based on light and productive, I can get a whole lot more work done. I understand you. I feel your pain, I guess we can say. But we know that didn't happen, and we know that that's probably not going to happen as long as human beings are biologically engineered the way that we are. But the point being, he wasn't allowing himself to look at his invention in terms of limits. Okay, now we have light, so we can turn it on and turn it off. How about we just keep it on all the time and everybody just stay awake all the time? Most human beings, ladies and gentlemen, we're still on point number 2 here. The topic, once again, is how to think bigger. Most human beings create these self-imposed limits that act as concrete ceilings on their lives. Not glass ceilings, concrete ceilings on their lives. And since none of us as human is perfect, we come up short even of the concrete ceilings that we put on ourselves. So these limits that we put on ourselves, we usually don't even hit those limits. We come up short of those, which means we don't even fulfill the limited potential that we give to ourselves. A lot of people create limits for themselves and then they call themselves being, quote, realistic, close quote. And I want you to take a look at masterclasses, or take a listen to masterclass is number 1062. The topic is reality is negotiable. And masterclass number 715. The topic being reality is killing you. So if you ever found yourself saying you need to be a little bit more realistic by putting limits on your capabilities, listen to masterclasses 1062 and 715. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is how to think bigger. Third thing you need to do, break out of the mental prison of your current situation. What does this mean? It means don't look at your potential based on what you are doing or what you have right now. If you're wherever you're at right now, I don't care how well you're doing, how poorly you're doing, how stagnant your situation is, your potential, where you could be in the future, has nothing to do with where you are right now. If you only see where you are and who you are and what you have today, and you aren't able to take your mind away from that or above where you are right now, I'll predict your future for you. You will either be right there where you are, or if you work really hard, you'll be marginally better than where you are right now. Maybe one level above. You're on the 3rd floor, you'll be on the 4th floor, metaphorically speaking. And if you don't work really hard, you'll probably go down. In other words, you'll be just like everybody else. Most people in life look at where they are, what they have, what they've done to this point, to the current moment, whatever the current moment happens to be for each one of us individually, and we project ourselves to pretty much be in the same spot in the future. And that's what happens to most people. Or if we work really hard, we can become a little bit better. We can become marginally better, meaning wherever you're at, if you're making 100,000, you can see yourself making 120,000. You're scoring 20 points a game, you can see yourself scoring maybe 22 or 23 points a game. Again, metaphorically speaking, you could use this for anything that you have going on in life. Most people can only see themselves, they're only capable of seeing themselves as marginally better than where they are right now, meaning they can't expand their vision past what they can physically see with the human eye. The human eye is not that great of an object, it's not that strong. Look at the average people around you and ask yourself this question. If you ascended to the level of being marginally better than them, would that be fulfilling to you? Would that make you happy? Would you feel great about yourself if that's as far as you went? If the answer is no, then you have to do what they can't do and what they don't do, which is see yourself in places and in doing things and as a type of person that those people could never see themselves as, even if they wanted to, even if they listened to everything that I just said. This is what I mean by freeing yourself of the mental prison called reality. If you want to be just like everybody else, then you can keep seeing your potential as only marginally better. I can get a little bit better than I am right now. I can move up a little bit. I can go from, my parents were lower middle class. I can get the middle class, and then my kids can get the upper middle class. And that's marginal thinking. That's how most people think. And the problem is the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. So even when you have those marginal thoughts of getting marginally better, you usually fall short of them because you're not perfect. All right, that's the perfect outcome. If everything goes perfectly, you become marginally better. But since everything doesn't go perfectly, what happens is you usually stay pretty much about the same as where you were before. This is what we talk about. If you ever hear people talk about, I want to break the cycle of my family being a certain way. This is why the cycle occurs in the first place. It's not because everybody in the family is a loser and they don't want to get better. It's because they only project themselves as being marginally better. And since marginally better is not but a little bit more better, and since human beings aren't perfect, you will never even hit that. And this is why people end up doing the exact same thing the people who came before them did. And then you just had this cycle of sameness, this cycle of the redundancy, because nobody can see themselves doing anything outsized of what everybody else has done. So if you want to be like everybody else, you could just do that. You could just do whatever you were doing before you listened to this masterclass, because you probably already programmed this way, because most people in life are average. So by definition, you were probably programmed by an average person. Maybe you were lucky enough to not be. But you had the choice to make the decision to decide to think outside of that. You can think bigger than that anytime that you choose, but you must make the choice. This is not something that happens to you by default. This is a decision that you must make. Let's recap today's class, which is how to think bigger. I was in Vegas. I saw that the Wynn Hotel, which is probably, in my opinion, the nicest lodging on the Las Vegas Strip, and somebody has stayed somewhere that you think is better, and I've been in a lot of them. They had a parking garage built just for the staff, and I said, that's big thinking. And just a small thing that most people wouldn't even notice, but they led to this masterclass. You should be happy that I saw it. Point number 1, develop a complete disregard for where your abilities end. You must entertain the idea that you can do a lot more than you're doing. As Napoleon Hill said, the starting point of achievement is a burning desire. You wouldn't have the desire if it was not possible for you to create it. If you can see it in your mind, it means you can be it. Like Kobe Bryant said, it's 1 in a million to make the NBA. I'm trying to be that one. Point number 2, stop thinking in terms of limits. George Jung in the movie Blow, when he was selling marijuana, he wanted to buy the whole marijuana crop from some farmer. The farmer couldn't believe it because nobody ever bought the whole crop from him. He thought it was a ridiculous idea. George said, I'll bring you 50 grand. Would that alleviate your concerns? The farmer said, I have no concerns if you got 50 grand. Thomas Edison said people will no longer need to sleep because light bulbs will allow us to stay awake 24/7. Now, that didn't actually come to pass, but think of what kind of thinking Thomas Edison had to have in his mind. Back then, he had just created the light bulb to predict that was going to be the future. He was thinking big, even though, and this is good proof here, even though not every big thought is actually going to come to fruition, just the act of thinking that way creates a habit that even if that one doesn't work, maybe the next one will. Point number 3. Actually, let me tell you one more thing on point number 2. A lot of humans create self-imposed limits to act as concrete ceilings on their lives, and since nobody's perfect, we always come up short of what we have for ourselves often. So you got to make sure that the future that you project for yourself is way bigger than what you think you can do, because you're probably going to come up short of it because you're not perfect. Many people don't even fulfill the limited potential that we give to ourselves. We create these limits and we call it reality. Listen to masterclasses number 1062 and 715 about getting rid of this quote unquote reality that you've been programmed to think about. And point number 3, break out of the mental prison of your current situation. Do not look at your potential based on what you are doing or what you have or where you're at or who you are right now, because if that's all you see, that's pretty much all you're going to be. That's what average people do. They look at where they are right now and they project themselves maybe getting a little bit better, marginally better. Would it fulfill you if you became marginally better than what you are right now for the next 5 years and that's all you did? Would you be happy with that? Probably not. So you had to do what most people can't do, and what they don't do is to see yourself in places that they cannot see themselves at. That is what I mean by freeing yourself of the mental prison of reality. If you want more enrichment on this, I suggest you read my book, 100 Mental Game Best Practices, which is part of the 4-book Bulletproof Bundle, which you can get the best deal for by going to mirrorofmotivation.com, and you put in your information to get the free Mirror Motivation book shipped to you. There's a little checkbox right there on the order form where you can add the entire Bulletproof Bundle, all 4 books. That includes the Mental Handbook, the Super You, and the book I just mentioned, 100 Mental Game Best Practices. All 4 books physically shipped worldwide to your doorstep. Again, that's at mirrorofmotivation.com. Work on your game. Dre all day.